Good morning. Welcome to Animal Talk Thursdays. I'm Dawn Heyman, professional animal communicator and co-founder of Spring Farm Cares. And today we're doing something very different with our video. As you see, we're doing an outside shot, and we may even hear some donkeys braying in the background in a minute. But today, being Halloween, we thought we would do something special. And Halloween at Spring Farm Cares is a different kind of a day for us. And that is because Halloween of 1993, we had a very tragic fire that happened in our facility. We're actually sitting in the ruins of that building. It was a huge barn. It was a dairy barn originally, and it housed our offices, our apartment, and our small animal facility. So very sadly that night, we did lose 24 animals. We lost 17 cats, 3 parakeets, and 4 dogs that we couldn't get out. We managed to get 2 dogs and a cat out. And then 1 cat later showed up the following spring, which is a whole story in and of itself. So out of great tragedy, though, oftentimes, and as in our case, comes amazing opportunity. And we wanted to kind of talk about that today. And talk about what happened. So let me just tell you where I'm sitting, because these are really sacred grounds for Bonnie and for me. Bonnie Reynolds is the co-founder of Spring Farm, and this is actually her family farm, so very meaningful to her. And her grandfather had helped build the barn, and I mean, it's got a lot of history. So after the fire, we made a decision to keep this a memorial, basically. The animals who died in here are actually buried in here, and this place is very sacred. So we let nature take over, and as you can see, I'm sitting in this. I'm in the foundation of the building, but trees have grown up in here. Seeds fell into the piles of ash that are very fertile, and grew up, and we decided to leave it this way. And it makes a nice little grotto and a little garden. We have a little sitting area here. Visitors often come in here. Sometimes people are very drawn to come in here, and they actually don't know where they are. They don't know what they're sitting in, but it just feels incredibly sacred and good in here. So yes, there are difficult memories, but there are also a lot of others. It's 31 years now, and every Halloween we think about that day. Obviously, what started the fire was a really freak occurrence. It happened at about 11:40 at night, and luckily, Bonnie and I were out of the building. She was at that point living in the red farmhouse, taking care of her elderly mother, and I had gone in there for dinner, and we were all watching television. And I very oddly for me fell asleep on the sofa watching television. And that saved my life, because I normally would have been sound asleep in my apartment in this building, and the firemen have assured me I would have never gotten out of the building. The fire was very rapid. What happened was we had a freak snowstorm. For those of you who are around the Northeast, or at least upstate New York, in 1993, you might remember that Halloween snowstorm. We had over 14 inches of wet, heavy snow fell. And talk about a freak occurrence. We live on a major highway here, as you probably can hear traffic in the background. We had there was somebody tracked this after the fact, a couple of days after the fire. An inspector actually tracked down the cause of the fire, and we knew it was electrical. But what happened was a car accident happened 4 miles south of us, where a car went off the road and hit a telephone pole. And within 1 minute of that, 3 miles up north of us, a car went off the road and hit a telephone pole, and it caused a power spike to come both directions down the line. And we didn't have, the power company didn't give us a proper size transformer for this farm, which we didn't know, obviously. And the transformer also had a defect, and the power surge hit that transformer, came into the farm, and went to the weakest spot, which was our microwave and refrigerator in our kitchen. Luckily, at that point, it stopped there because the electricity went off at that point, and it saved our barn, because 12 feet away from me is our horse barn, and that barn was actually, the tin on the barn was glowing red. It was so hot. The fire was over 2,300 degrees. They know that because of the metals that actually melted. and everything was gone in about 20 minutes. So Bonnie and I were at that point evacuating the horses because the smoke would have killed them. We got them out just in the nick of time, and with the firefighters helping us and volunteers that had shown up. But we were evacuating the barn, so we weren't standing here watching. When we finished getting all of them out and came back out, we watched the last wall of the barn fall in, and it was gone. I mean, the whole thing was gone. Couldn't even wrap our heads around it. But we stood there and looked at each other and said, I remember saying to Bonnie, I don't know why, but I just know everything is going to be okay. And she said, I know that too. I don't know why either. And that was, a message given to us from the universe to our hearts, because it was true that everything would be okay. We had a firefighter who said, we get donkeys in the background. That's funny. I don't know if it picks up on the video. We had a firefighter that volunteered to help us, but the next day afterward. And there's a whole lot of recovery that goes into this. I, for one, wanted to recover the bodies of our animals. That was very meaningful to me, to give them a proper burial. And that was very difficult. We had to shovel and sift through an enormous amount of ash, because this was, it was unfathomable. We couldn't even get in for a couple of days because it was still smoldering. But anyway, the morning after the fire, I was standing up on the barn bridge, which is just to my right here. I don't know if you picked that up, but that concrete wall was actually the ramp that went up into the top of our barn, into the upstairs of the barn. And I was standing up there looking down into this, and you can't even make sense of it. I'm just standing there literally in shock, looking at everything and saying, how did this happen, and how could it just be gone? I mean, everything I had was gone, including my animals. And that was very painful. And all of a sudden, I realized it was a man standing next to me. I didn't even know where he came from. I didn't see anybody pull in. And there was this very tall man standing next to me, and he said to me, I just want you to know that this community this morning would have been very much grieving your passing if you had gone to bed as you normally would have last night. And he said, I know this is difficult looking at all of this, but you will be okay, and at least you're still here. And I said to him, but the animals are gone. And he said, I know, but they're still with you. And he then, he was gone. I mean, he just was like gone. But this was a real human being. He did come back and help us a few days later. And he gave up a week of his life every day shoveling with me until we uncovered all of the bodies that we needed to, and we buried them. So basically, there were just bones remaining at that point. So that was just one of the many stories that came out of this. So there are so many stories of artifacts that we found that were really important to Bonnie. Nothing of mine was found. Very interestingly enough, it was like everything was just wiped out. But Bonnie managed to get some artifacts which were really priceless for her, and so we did that. Looking around in here, we still have stuff from our kitchen, pottery, broken pottery, and we've been talked into leaving it there because it's like an art, it's like art in here. I don't know, but anyway, we've basically left it as is. After the fire, the morning after, the first thing I was trying to do is ascertain that the horses were okay, because we had evacuated them out in the dark at, midnight or close to midnight. And the last I saw of them was, everything was glowing here from the fire, but the last I saw of them were all of them together. They had never all been together, and they were in one pasture. And there were there were 17 hand thoroughbreds, and there were blind Shetland pony foals that were tiny, and they all got thrown out together. And I was just waiting for daybreak to get out there and see if the horses were okay, because we had already suffered so much loss that we were like, I hope we didn't lose any of the horses. So I was so relieved when there was enough daylight. We ran out into the pasture, and they were so relieved to see us, because I don't think they thought we were alive. And they all started whinnying and running down the hill to us, and we started doing a head count, and I had some missing. And they were way up in the back of the pasture, and I was terrified, that they went through fences or something because they'd never been up there. But actually, one of our horses had taken all of the Shetland ponies and the foals and rounded them up together, and he kept them away from all the others. He kept them totally safe. It was amazing. Um, but the following spring, so keeping this in mind, it's like 12 acres away. We have a tree called the God Tree, which some of you, if you get our journal Tattletales, we featured the God Tree in a story in the last issue of Tattletales, actually. And if you don't get it, you can sign up for that. A little advertisement. You can sign up for that on our website by signing up for our mailing list. It's a free journal. It comes out bi-monthly, or you can also find it on our website if you go to our news page. But anyway, I was up at the God Tree about 12 acres away, and all of a sudden I started seeing things on the ground. This is in the spring now. After we had a horrific winter that winter, we had like 12 feet of snow. I mean, it was just incredible how much snow we had. And I'm seeing things up by the God Tree, and I'm like, what is this? And all of a sudden I recognize there was like a small piece of paper, and I recognized my own handwriting. And I picked up the piece of paper, and it was from a journal that I kept of animal messages that I got that I had handwritten. It was a book. I was trying to make it into a book, and it had totally, perished in the fire, obviously. But the ash had spread that far away, 12 acres away, and to see some of my heartfelt work from the messages from the animals up there at the God Tree was just stunning. I mean, you get all of these things. There are miracles that come out of it that are just unbelievable. The morning after the fire, Bonnie and I had to have a real sit-down meeting, obviously, and say, where are we at? I mean, you can't imagine, you've lost everything. I mean, everything we had. We lost our mailing list. We couldn't even get in touch with people that had adopted animals from us. We couldn't get in touch with anybody. We couldn't send out a mailing. We lost all of our computers. We lost all of our data. And you don't even have a toothbrush or toothpaste. I mean, it's very surreal. But one of the biggest questions was, what are we going to do? And both of us knew instantly that we were given an opportunity here for something really incredibly special. And that was, we had been, for 2 years, we had been a nonprofit, a struggling nonprofit, because we were struggling just every day to make ends meet. And there were mistakes we made along the way that we would have done differently. A lot of animal sanctuaries and rescues start this way. You take in too many animals that you get over your head with what your money has, and we were heading that direction. And it's hard to reel that back in. But when suddenly everything was taken away, we had the horses and everything to take care of. I mean, we still had all the horses. It was just the small animal facility was the one that was destroyed, but we had all those horses to take care of, and no homes for them to go to. They're not placeable animals. So we realized, no, we're picking up, we're moving on, we start again. Only this time we started from a much more mature and wiser place, and we got a chance to do things over that we wouldn't have done right the first time, that we didn't do right the first time because we didn't know. But now we knew. And so we had a chance to make this something bigger, or better, not bigger necessarily, but better. And we set out to do that. And we set out to do it so that it would be something that surpassed our lifetimes. And that was always our intention from day one anyway. But Spring Farm Cares then became what Spring Farm Cares is today. It was reborn on that day with a new vision, more dedication to the mission, and the universe slipped into place and helped us. It was really incredible. So that was in October. We had a couple of cats and dogs that got out of the fire, and we needed to house them. We were all crammed into the farmhouse with her elderly mom, with Bonnie's mom, and we needed to start to rebuild. And what we needed to do that was complicated, because we had a home equity loan or Bonnie, I should say, owned the property at the time. She had a home equity loan on the barn that burned. And we were assured by our attorneys and everything that the bank is not going to, foreclose on you, but they did. And so the bank foreclosed. We owed $40,000, which we didn't have. And we couldn't come up with $40,000. And we were now looking at losing the farm. And for a farm that was worth way more than $40,000, it was absolutely ridiculous. But it was suddenly the position we were in when literally the night before the official foreclosure, we got a donor out of nowhere called us and said, "You're getting a money wire to your account." And this person did not know about the foreclosure, by the way. You're going to get a money wire to your account. I just didn't want you to think it was a mistake. And what was being wired in the next day was $60,000. And what we needed to start the rebuild, we needed $20,000 for a basement. And once we had the enclosed basement, we could house the animals that we had in there. And that was the start. It was the basement of what's now our big hall for the small animal facility on George Kiger Cat Hall. But the $60,000 paid off the $40,000 for the bank mortgage and the $20,000 for the start of the basement. And that is how it went. We literally built it brick by brick with public donations. We did $1 a block fundraiser so people could buy a block for the building. And anyway, we raised the funds to do this, and we through donations and through some bequests that we got later on, we were able to rebuild, and that's how we got to where we are today. So that the fire, it sounds weird to say. It was the most tragic thing that ever happened here to us in modern day. It also was the biggest gift we were ever given, because it taught us a lot. It taught us to trust in the universe, that we can create this. Bonnie and I started Spring Farm Cares with the philosophy that we create our own reality, that we are the ones that create what we want to create. And it honed us into going into our hearts and really figuring out what we wanted to create and making it happen. We're living proof of that. I mean, because we had nothing. And then we made this, and we made this into what it is today. And it's a trust in that our thoughts, our passions from our heart literally create the world around us. It creates the reality that we create for ourselves, that we live. And so this fire taught us to really trust that process more, and we had to keep going. And the other thing is, I think for the loss of those animals, for me personally anyway, I always knew I had to keep moving on for them. And I know for me, my apartment was in this farm. When I moved to this farm, and that was in 1989, I believe. So I moved here and had my apartment up in the upstairs of that barn. This was everything for me. I just lived in this, in the barn. Bonnie had grown up on this farm since she was 7 years old. So the farmhouse is home to her. And I'm not saying because she lost everything in this fire as well. I'm not saying that was less traumatic for her. But for me, I just had this. And I can't tell you how many days I was out working with the horses or whatever, and suddenly something would like upset me or challenge me, where I felt challenged. And I suddenly would I wanted to come to my apartment with my cats. And I find myself walking to the door, just automatically walking to the door. And I'd stand there and just stare in disbelief that there was nothing but ash, piles of ash, because my body would still like take me back to what was home for me. And I had to really learn that home is where I am. And for me personally, I had just turned 30 years old when this fire happened. And literally it was, 11 days after I turned 30. And it was a delicate time for me, and a really developmental time. Also, I was just coming in professionally to the animal communication part of things, and trusting what I was getting from these animals that died, that they were okay, and that they were still with me, and that they wanted us to carry on. They didn't want us to stop. And I have, myriad of stories from those animals and different things that they told me afterward and their experiences, including the cat that came back in the spring. I mean, that showed up. That messed with my head a lot. We were so thrilled to have him back. His name was Archibald Peabody III. Archie. We just called him Archie, but that was his full name. And Archie lived in my apartment, but we had a spiral staircase that went down into a bathroom on the first floor. And I went around breaking windows. Bonnie and I were both going around. If we found things to break windows with, and we broke the windows, hoping that some of the cats would get out. And so in the spring, when we found Archie, I didn't even know how he survived the winter, but he did. He was across the street in the nature sanctuary. We kept seeing footprints coming across the road in the snow, but we just, people dump cats all the time, and there are stray cats around. So we just assumed maybe that's where that was from. But it ended up being Archie. And what for me was how many more got out that I don't know about and what happened to them. That messed with me a lot for a long time. I had to really struggle with that one. Were some of my cats out there, did they starve to death or, whatever? And so that was hard, not knowing that. But in my heart, I know that they died in the fire. Archie was one of the only ones that would go down that spiral staircase. He loved to come down. So he obviously found his way down and managed to get out that window. One of the things personally for me that I learned is about facing tragedy, and something I want to say, because a lot of people, maybe even some people watching this, have been through, we've had a lot of natural disasters, for example, where whole towns are wiped out in the hurricanes, and there's so much loss, and you can't at first wrap your head around it. But out of that loss will come amazing opportunity, even if you don't see it at first. But for me, what I learned is kind of to look past the tragedy. And I learned that I could face things that I didn't think I could face. Fire to me, still, I won't lie, it's still my biggest fear. And anybody can tell you around here, if suddenly there's a smell of smoke outside, I go ballistic and start running around looking at everything. We have cameras set up all over the farm, security cameras, largely so if I have one of those in the middle of the night, I can just get on the phone and look around and see that everything is okay. That doesn't leave me, but it also taught me that there's a much higher power that is in charge of things. And even for my greater self, there are forces that are greater than me. So let me just give you this one example. For years, I harbored huge guilt for not getting my animals out. Bonnie and I both tried to get to the apartment independently of one another. We were both running around trying to get animals out. And we first found, when we opened the door, because I'm the one that found the fire and got Bonnie, and we ran out. And I knew when I threw the door open that it's like everything becomes surreal. And I knew that the fire would expand as soon as I threw the door open, which it did. But two dogs, one tumbled out. He was actually almost unconscious from the smoke, and he was right up against the door. And when I opened it, he fell out, and we got him. And then one of them came barreling out from behind, from further back in to the barn, and she was a paralyzed little miniature German Shepherd, and she wasn't, the breed wasn't a miniature. I know there's no such thing, but she was stunted in her growth because of birth defects that she had, so she was tiny. But she came flying out, and I thought, if Cookie can come out, the rest of the dogs, we can get them, and they were already gone, or we just couldn't get to them. So then, my thought went to my apartment, which I had an entrance from the second floor, and I ran up and went to walk in, and it's a all wood, very dry wood floor from a barn, a 100-year-old barn. I mean, all the wood is extremely dry, and it was just coming up. The fire was just coming up the back wall, and I knew that floor was going to flash over, and I could not make myself walk. It's about probably 25 steps to the door. Bonnie later told me that she did the same thing. She went up there too. And the firemen also told us at that point we would have probably died trying, and the animals were probably already gone because the smoke had all gone up there first, So, but it taught me a lot about that sometimes there are things at play that you don't know about. And so when you're going through a tragedy and it first seems like it is nothing but a tragedy. Sometimes there are greater things coming and you just can't see them right away. And that's how it was for us, for sure. I mean, now 30 years hindsight, you know, we can look back and see the steps that happened that even that night. It was a weird set of steps that happened. The firefighters couldn't get here because of the snow, and there were trees down everywhere, and they had to keep trying um, different routes to get here. One fire department that was coming from south of us, it was snowing so hard they didn't see it, and this was a building on fire, and they drove right by, and it was crazy. We got one fire truck got stuck in the middle of the road, it got stuck in our lawn, and then caught on fire. It had an electrical fire in the fire truck. A truck lost its brakes coming down the hill, and they had fire trucks parked across the road, and he would have barreled into them, but luckily somebody sounded a horn up the street, and the firefighter was in the truck and was able to back it out. That's how he actually got stuck on the lawn. But there could have been all these disasters in addition to this. We had a firefighter that actually fell in from the second floor. He fell into the burning rubble, and they got him out. So there were so many things that we look back on and say, you know, there were really angels watching out for us. Even though we lost the 24 animals, we lost everything we had. Those were just possessions. The things were not important. Clearly, that's a lesson in there as well, but that's a lesson I had learned prior to that anyway. I'm not big on holding on to things, but it was just that it was almost perfectly orchestrated in many ways. And then to see where that brought us to today, you can honestly, after 30 years looking back, see the incredible intervention we had from elsewhere, you know, that helped us get through that, and that the fire itself was less of a tragedy than we imagined it was. So I just wanted to say that, because people going through trauma, I just want to say, a lot of times you can't see past that trauma while you're in it, but just keep going step by step, because you will go through, you will get out the other side, and it will be different. So thank you everybody for sharing all of this. I know that it seems like a lot of sad memories, but it's also a lot of good memories, and Halloween will never be the same again here on the farm for sure. But thank you all for sharing in this today, in this special message, in this sacred place of the farm. And also, if you do want to hear more about the story and the uplifting things that happened from the story, we have it all written in a book called If Only They Could Talk by Bonnie Reynolds and Dawn Heyman, and you can get that on Amazon, or if you come to the farm, we sell them here as well. But it tells the whole story, and it's very uplifting.